Hello everybody and welcome to the War Room. This one is for Robbie Lawler against Neil Magny. So obviously Neil Magny was supposed to be fighting Jeff Neal. He's had to withdraw from the fight. Robbie Lawler stepped up, coming off 3 losses. Not the best position of his career, obviously, but it's Robbie Lawler. So, how can you not be excited about it? Okay, so how did this fight play out? Well, Neil Magny's the taller, longer range fighter. So we've got 6'3", 80 inches against 5'11", 74 inches. It's a decent bit of difference. The other difference is the pace of Neil Magny, and this is echoed in his finishing ability. So Magny's record is 23-8 with 7 knockouts, and Robbie Lawler is 28-14 with 20 knockouts. Robbie Lawler's a big puncher. He's also not really bothered about submissions. He's got 1 arm bar in his record. Not really interested in submissions. Mainly interested in keeping the fight in his range and punching your head off your shoulders. Neil Magny will take any route to victory he can, and a lot of those routes to victory is pace and ability to outwork his opponent with conditioning. He trains at altitude. He lives at altitude. He's training with guys that he's being coached by guys that fought in the UFC that know how to prepare fighters for a fight. And Neil Magny has been able to outwork some of the best of them. I mean, the ones that come to mind for me, Lombard and Hendricks are the 2 that stand out. His durability and his conditioning is what keeps him in these fights. And then the fact that he's long range and he's able to just kind of pepper people with shots and cut them down over the distance. Robbie Lawler has a tendency to wait for the perfect opportunity. So Robbie Lawler's a southpaw. He has a long stance and he uses the Philly shell quite a lot when he's up against the fence. He uses his head movement a lot, which is why he's got a wide stance. If he had a narrower stance, he wouldn't be able to slip his head nearly as much because he would be losing his balance. So he widens his stance, which allows him more movement of his head, and it also allows him to roll punches off his shoulders and off the sides of his head. It's something that James Toney does. We see it very rarely in MMA. It's not a very adaptable style to MMA. There are certain times to use it, absolutely, but Robbie Lawler's made a style out of it, and he's been very effective for the most part, but there are some drawbacks to it. So first and foremost, he's got a wide stance, which makes that lead leg very vulnerable. And we saw Covington, we saw Johnny Hendricks smash that leg to pieces, and it does upset everything else about his game because you need your legs to punch. If you're a power puncher, you need your legs underneath you. Covington just kept hacking at the legs. Hendricks did a lot of damage, and you could see it was affecting the way that Robbie Lawler was moving. The one anomaly in this is one of the best knockouts that you'll see in Robbie Lawler's record, and that was the Melvin Manhoff fight. And Manhoff is a vicious Thai boxer, a heavy kicker, and absolutely annihilated the legs of Robbie Lawler in that fight as well. But Lawler, as the leg flares out to the side, he comes back with a right hook and knocks Manhoff out. So although he can be very susceptible to low kicks, and although he can show that pain, and although he does get backed up, and he doesn't tend to block kicks as much as he should do, if he decides to punch off the back of one of them, he can still take your chin off with one punch. So the main assets of Robbie Lawler, being a southpaw, he's got that long right hook and he's got that rear shovel punch. That's a beautiful weapon. Really, really useful against someone like Neil Magny. Because Magny's taller, because Magny likes to clinch, because he's got good knees, to try and get Robbie Lawler and break his posture. Now, if I'm standing upright and somebody gets me in a Thai clinch, it's much easier to break my posture. If I'm standing side on and I have a very rigid stance like Robbie Lawler does, to break his posture to bring him down for a knee is going to be really difficult. It also gives him that short punch up on the inside as well, which Magny's going to have to put himself in range of to get his hands on Robbie Lawler. So if I'm Neil Magny coming into this one, I'm not expecting to finish this fight. That's my game plan, is distance, a dominant decision. If the finish presents itself, take it absolutely, but don't push for it because it's Robbie Lawler and you might just be wasting your time. You might walk onto something that you're reminded of in the replays when you wake up. For Magny, he's got that long-range jab. He's got a really nice snapping jab and long-range kicks that can just prod and break down his opponents at a distance and remind them how much taller and longer he is than them. If he's moving into the clinch, he's got to be aggressive about it and he's got to work fast. If he's going strength for strength with Robbie Lawler, I think that's when he's going to realise that that's not a good idea. Lawler is one of those guys that has a physical strength about him. No matter who he's fighting, you can always see that ability to just muscle people if he needs to. You've got to think about Robbie Lawler from who he was as a fighter way back in the day. So Robbie Lawler, made his UFC debut, I think he was 19 or 20 years old, a long time ago. He was also one of the main sparring partners of Matt Hughes at the time, who was the champion. Pat Miletich, who was his coach at the time, who also is a former UFC champion. All guys that are a good size for Robbie Lawler to work with. I mean, Pat Miletich was, welterweight and then middleweight champion. Matt Hughes was a long-time welterweight champion. He also had other guys in his camp, the likes of Spencer Fisher and Jens Pulver, that were slightly smaller but very, very quick and tenacious, and would have really pushed him as well. So we had, if you're a 20-year-old Robbie Lawler in the Miletich camp, you've got the perfect assets on both sides. The fast, agile guys that are good strikers with good submissions, and the really strong wrestlers that know how to put a dominant beating on you. I expect Robbie Lawler from those experiences to have developed a really, really tough, durable, ground game submission defense, which we have seen in the later years. He's always gravitated towards his striking. And we'll have to try and find this video, because every time I think of Robbie Lawler, I always think of this. It was an old UFC build-up video. It was a punch bag hanging in a garage for the Americans out there. I'll translate for myself. And he was just, this is what Robbie Lawler would do. He'd just go into the garage and he'd just beat the hell out of this bag. And I mean, that really is what his style was when he first came into the UFC. His knockout of Tiki Gosin was just him 0 to 60. I'm just going to start you with big power. The only times he's really paid for it, especially in the UFC, was Nick Diaz, when he got caught with that kind of right hook as he was moving forward. But that was his aggression moving himself onto a punch. Part of the reason why he was knocked out. We've only seen him stop twice in the octagon. Once was Nick Diaz, and the other one was Tyron Woodley. Just completely blasted him out of the water and took the welterweight belt off him. He's a tough guy. He's a durable guy. Whatever you think about the Ben Askren fight, I felt like Robbie Lawler was doing excellently until he lost consciousness for a second, and that's when the confusion was. Good win for Ben Askren, but not really the full expression of who Robbie Lawler is as a fighter. Who Robbie Lawler is as a fighter was him elevating Ben Askren through the air and slamming him on the floor. I think Lawler comes into this one with a lot to prove. He's coming off 3 losses. He's been up at the top of the tree. He's been fighting some of the best in the division, champions, former champions. He's been tested. He's been pushed. He's given us some of the best fights in UFC history. In this one, he's got 3 rounds against Neil Magny, who is very dangerous and he's very, very tricky. And because he keeps such a pace, and because Robbie Lawler does tend to wait for the perfect opportunity, I expect Robbie to be losing this fight until he perhaps wins. This is really Neil Magny's fight to win over the distance, to kind of pick him apart, take his legs away, work those knees up the midsection and not forget the elbows, because that's where he's going to do his most damage in the clinch. I think knees are going to put him in a very vulnerable place with Robbie Lawler and those sharp shovel punches that come up the center. Okay, let me just think. Let me see if I've forgotten anything. I've said Lawler's susceptible to kicks. Magny's got to build his game off a jab, but he's got to outwork him. I just think that the longer this fight goes, the more it suits Neil Magny, because he can slowly rack up the shots. He's not looking for that perfect punch because he's not necessarily gifted with knockout power. As great as knockout power can be, it can also work against you because you've always got it and you only need a few seconds to make it count. Neil Magny doesn't get into the octagon with that mindset. He knows he has to win every minute of the fight, otherwise the decision might slip away from him. Or he might get caught in the last 10 seconds by Robbie Lawler and knocked out. He needs to make sure he's winning every part of the fight up to that point. I don't think there's going to be too much grappling in this one. I think Neil Magny might try and engage Robbie Lawler in the grappling, but his sub-defense is so stubborn, and he's so good at keeping his back against the fence and just working his way back up to the feet. It might be a frivolous effort if Neil Magny wants to finish the fight on the floor. It might be a very good use of energy if he wants to wear Robbie Lawler down, though. Certainly in that first round, if Neil Magny wants to spend a bit of energy holding Robbie Lawler up against the fence and beating him up in the clinch, that might be a smart thing to do. Robbie Lawler's always that counter-puncher, though. He's waiting for Neil Magny to walk into his range where he can catch him with something that's horrendously powerful. Robbie Lawler's always one of my favourites to watch, and I think Neil Magny's a real tricky test for anybody in this division and has the ability to beat anybody on any night. I'm expecting this one to be a real good fun fight, and I'm really respectful of Robbie Lawler for taking this one because he'll know full well Neil Magny's not an easy fight for anybody. Enjoy the fights. See you next time.